you for joining us today. Alesia Haas, I'm the CFO of Coinbase. I'm here with Brian. And we're just going to address the elephant in the room because where else would we start? So Brian, what's your perspective? What is going on with our dear regulator, the SEC?
Right. Well, look, the bad news is that we have an SEC chair who's kind of hostile to crypto, and we haven't been able to get a clear set of rules in the US to build our business. That's not good for America. But the good news is that there is rule of law in this country, and we've always been committed to following the law. The SEC has to follow the law too. So this is now an opportunity for us to go to court, get some case law created to finally get some clarity for this industry. And that'll take a little while to play out, but it's business as usual in the meantime. We're still trading as usual, our staking program is running. And there's a few other things that we can do in parallel. I mean, we're working with Congress. Congress is putting out draft legislation, which is great to see, which might help bring some more clarity, as we've seen happen in the EU, the UK, other regions of the world. The CFTC is another federal regulator we work with, right? And they have their own opinion about what is and what is not a security, so that's an opportunity. We have our APA challenge that we're working through with the courts about how the SEC needs to engage with us. We did a formal petition for rulemaking a while back, which they didn't respond to. And then frankly, the 2024 elections is also a factor here. It's kind of politically unpopular to be anti-crypto right now, and we are going to see potentially a change there, whether in administration parties or just the SEC chair himself. So I think those are all possibilities that could play out, and eventually America's going to get this right. I mean, this is a land of technology innovation and freedom and rule of law. This is going to be a legal and regulated business. It's for crypto securities and commodities and everything else, stable coins, artwork. We're going to get this right eventually, and Coinbase is committed to helping make that happen.
Thank you. I think it would be interesting to talk to this group about how we see this regulatory environment impacting the competitive landscape. We've seen so many headlines over the last month, regulation aside, but just with what's happening in the industry and the various players.
Yeah, well, actually, I think this is a really big opportunity for us in terms of the competitive landscape. I mean, it's hugely validating of our strategy that we've taken over the last 11 years, which is to build a compliant and trusted regulated company. We've made every effort to follow the law, to come up with good regulatory actions in the absence of clarity, and then where there is clarity, we've gone and sought basically every license you can get around the world. And so that often was a more difficult path. It was a slower path. It was a more expensive path, but I think it's ultimately proving to be the right path. And as we've seen other enforcement actions come down, which I always have to remind people is very different than, we're engaged with the SEC on a civil matter that's kind of a technical issue about what is a commodity and what is a security. The courts can help get clarity there. The other issues we're seeing in the industry are very different. They're criminal matters. There's allegations of wash trading, commingling of funds, executives and CEOs being named personally. None of that is really an issue at Coinbase. And so I actually think this is our opportunity to emerge as the global leader. And it took the long, hard road turned out to be, I think, the right path.
What is your reaction, though? We've also seen in the news, EDX has come forward with a new digital exchange. Deutsche Bank is coming out with a custody product. We've seen TradFi lean in.
Yeah, it's kind of remarkable. I mean, crypto is having a little bit of a rally right now, and we are seeing the industry just continue to move forward with traditional financial services players making big moves in this space. BlackRock, Fidelity, just go on down the list. I think I saw a report recently, that we put out with the block, kind of showing that I think 52% of Fortune 500 companies had some sort of initiative happening in crypto. So despite some negative rhetoric and headlines, this industry is moving forward, and I think that's pretty exciting.
I do too. At least that's what I wake up to every morning.
Yeah.
I want to talk about that, what I wake up to every morning, what I think our 3,500 employees wake up to every morning, what I think our millions of customers wake up to. Talk to me about the power of crypto. What are the unique capabilities of this industry? Why do we think the world is going to be on-chain, and on-chain is the next online?
Yeah, well, look, the global financial system is in need of an update. It's in serious need of an update, right? I mean, 80% of Americans, if you poll them, they'll say the financial system today is leaving a lot to be desired. They want something more from it. And it's not surprising to hear that because there's high fees, right? There's delays. It doesn't have equal access to people all over the world. There's many people in the world, even in the US, who are unbanked, but globally it's almost 2 billion people. And so the current financial system today, it's this patchwork quilt of different fragmented proprietary oligopolies in each country of the world. And that's not how the economy looks today. The economy is more and more globalized. It's more and more digital. It's happening online. E-commerce is becoming a bigger and bigger percentage of global GDP. So it makes sense, just intuitively, that we should have currency, a system of moving value, all types of value that is more global and decentralized, kind of like the internet. And so crypto has these tailwinds behind it, and these properties that it has around being decentralized. It's permissionless in the sense that everybody in the world has fair access to this system if you just have an internet connection and a smartphone. It's no longer a small set of gatekeepers who've managed to get some license or whatever in each country of the world. Maybe in a lot of places it's due to corruption and nepotism, and there's all these things in many countries of the world where that's how you go get like the one bank license in Venezuela or whatever it is. And there's people all over the world who we sort of take it for granted here in the US that the money in our bank account is basically going to be there for us. It's ours. A lot of people in the world just don't have this luxury. I mean, funds are seized out of their accounts if they're political dissidents or if they're refugees. Like for instance, in what happened in Syria, people fled Iran, and all of their wealth was confiscated on the way out. And so, just having basic property rights, free trade, sound currency. Believe it or not, crypto, I think, is the best technology we have in the world to provide this to everybody who has a smartphone. And that has enormous potential for the world to have more economic freedom, but also to just have better GDP per capita and more innovation and more businesses being created, more global trade. So it's hugely beneficial to society. This is a technology that needs to update the financial system.
And more than the financial system, most.
Yeah, we should talk about that too.
Let's get there. Let's talk about use cases then,
Okay.
because I think that's the natural. So we have all these great attributes of crypto. What do we think this lends itself to in terms of the use cases that we're seeing today, and then in the future, what we think could happen?
Yeah, so a lot of people, I think they still think about crypto as really just an asset class that people trade and frankly speculate on. And that's certainly how it got started, and it's still a piece of what is there today. But we shared in our Q1 earnings that about 50% of our revenue is now coming from non-trading fees. And there's lots of other things that people are doing with crypto. So I'll tell you about some of the big ones that are already there today, and then I'll talk about some that I think are on the horizon. So in terms of the ones that are already there today, other than trading, so a big one is stablecoins. This has gotten a lot of traction in recent years, and I think there's now over $100 billion or so tied up in stablecoins of various kinds. Now, some of that helped facilitate online trading and with DeFi and stuff. But another use case of it is that there's people in the world who they don't have access to stable currency, right? They live in countries, Venezuela or others that went through high inflation, and so they wanted to have access to a digital dollar or something like that. It's also being used in many countries to facilitate payments, right, between like cross-border payments in Africa or places like that. And so just having stablecoins is clearly a very popular use case, killer app. DeFi is also really popular, right? There's, I don't know, 40, 50 billion or so locked up in DeFi protocols. People are using this to get access to credit, like small loans, right? Or to run, again, more decentralized versions of financial services that they don't have, we sort of take it for granted here in the US. NFTs, it's still a big thing. I mean, it had a huge moment in kind of 2021. It came down, but it's still there. There's, I don't know the exact amount, but it's probably 10 billion plus of value locked up in NFTs. People are creating new ways to reward artists and creative people for their content.
And not just artists, like we're seeing major Fortune 100 corporations really engage with NFTs as well.
Yeah, Nike, major brands, Reddit, Twitter has support for NFTs. So it's really becoming more and more integrated. NFTs are a very real thing. And then I guess I would say, actually decentralized identity, I think has started, you could count it as very real today. I mean, there's about 3 million people or so who have set up a decentralized identity. If you see on Twitter, a lot of people have their name .eth or whatever. Decentralized identity is definitely nascent, but it's real. And we're even seeing the first country in the world adopt crypto as a real currency in El Salvador, it's a small country, but you got to start somewhere. And if I had to guess, over the next 5-10 years, we'll see other countries follow. So those are the ones that are already there today. They're real. Let's talk about some maybe that are on the horizon. So I think decentralized social media is one that could be big in the future. People have this sense that when they post things to social media today, the content is really owned not by them, but it's owned by these big tech companies, and they want to have more control of their own text, audio, video. Creative people want to be able to put out a song or something and have a direct relationship with their fans. They can do that through decentralized social as well and have it all live on chain. I think gaming in the metaverse is another big area that could be big on the horizon. People, again, they want to actually own the assets, the digital assets that are in these games, and have the portability to take it with them.
That's the key part,
elsewhere.
It's the portability, because
Yeah.
we own assets in games today, but you're in a game. It's a closed loop.
Right, it's a closed loop ecosystem. Let's see, I think actually there's an opportunity in crypto for people to make a coin that is not backed by a fiat currency.
Oh, this
but
is
it's
our favorite conversation.
Yeah,
Okay.
but it's actually what's kind of being called a flat coin. It's something that could track like inflation or CPI. So I don't know. There's a lot of interesting ideas on the horizon that people are playing with, and the future is exciting.
So I'm going to be a skeptic for a minute, and we know I'm not, but I have to play one. So why don't we see those today? What's taking so long? We talk all the time about utilities coming, but we still see these bubbles of speculation. So what needs to happen from a technology standpoint to make these use cases even more adopted, even more tangible and realized in our daily lives?
Yeah, well, I think there's a handful of things that have prevented this from happening faster, and it's things that we're actively working on. So one of them is the scalability of the blockchains, right? We've got to get from layer 1 to layer 2 solutions. You may have heard about a number of these layer 2 solutions. There's Lightning on Bitcoin, there's Polygon, there's
You should
Arbitrum.
maybe explain what is a layer 2 for this group.
Right, well, okay, so a layer 2, there's a whole technical architecture of it, but the important thing is that it allows crypto transactions in the blockchains to operate at another order of magnitude or 2 of scalability. So
Faster and cheaper.
yeah.
Faster, cheaper.
And we need to basically get every transaction in crypto to be under 1 cent US, confirm within a few seconds. Today, that's not the case. A transaction on Ethereum might be $5 or sometimes $10.
Or variable.
It varies, right? And Bitcoin's even a little more expensive and slow. So it's kind of like when the internet had to move from dial-up to broadband. It's actually pretty remarkable that all the applications that I mentioned earlier have been built today mostly on layer 1, which is quite slow and quite expensive. I think it shows the desire of people to go through that level of pain just to use these things.
Right.
So if we get into the broadband era of crypto, that'll be huge. The second one is really what we talked about earlier. It's the regulatory clarity. I mean, I think that, frankly, that's been a huge barrier. Every startup that tries to create something new in the U.S. has enormous legal fees. We've seen a lot of entrepreneurs kind of leave the U.S. And so that's good for other countries. It's not necessarily good for the U.S. I'd say the last one, so it's the scalability, the regulatory clarity, and then the third one I'd say is the user interfaces need to get even simpler. It's kind of like, we had the Netscape moment for the internet or the iPhone moment for mobile.
Or the AOL where I had to put the CD in the computer.
Yeah. There's a lot of these kind of things we'll look back on, I think, where today people have to kind of, they have to learn how to bridge from layer 1 to layer 2, and they have to install a Chrome extension, and they have to connect their wallet, and all that stuff should just work. And I think in the future, when you connect into a dApp, it's just going to, your identity and your payment method's already connected. You won't have to do anything. You don't have to understand how layer 2 works. It all just needs to work seamlessly for the customer. And a lot of these people, they're going to come into crypto not because they care about crypto. They're just trying to do something. Like, they're an artist, or they want to play this game, or they want to send money to their family in another country.
They want to be part of a community and own part of an asset connected to their favorite artist or
Yeah,
their favorite creator.
they want to get paid, or they want to earn something if they're helping contribute to a community.
Or transmit money to another country with 1 second for no
Right.
fees. Yeah,
Right, and
those
it
are
may
good
even
things.
just be denominated in the local currency. They don't even know that it's using crypto underneath, right?
Right.
So that's how we get to 1 billion plus people. A lot of the tech early adopters have already come in, and people who want to trade. Now it's the use cases, the utility that's going to drive the next wave.
Do you want to talk about what we're doing to accelerate some of these things? Because we have some exciting initiatives in scalability and usability.
Yeah, I mean, so we have our own layer 2 solution that we're building called Base, and that's been really exciting. It's still in testnet. We'll be launching it soon, but we've got an incredible amount of developer interest, and I think that's going to allow us to help participate in that scalability effort and deeply integrate it into all of our products. So again, it just works, and people don't have to worry about how to bridge it or things like that.
What I think is so important is that there are teams, technical teams, working on these hard problems. We have teams on scalability at Coinbase and then across the ecosystem. We have teams on usability at Coinbase and across the ecosystem. And what we see when we look at developer activity, it is the one constant metric that continues to go up and to the right in this space. Despite the volatility of price and changing in market caps, we continue to attract talent to the space. We continue to attract interest in growing these assets. And that's what I think is really dynamic and fun. All right. Let's talk a little bit Coinbase now for a second. You've been at this 11 years? So did we just have your 11-year anniversary? How has our business model shifted through time at Coinbase? How has our revenue shifted? And how do you think about adapting to the constantly new dynamics of crypto?
Yeah, well, I mean, as a CFO, I feel like I should be asking you this
All right,
question.
well, it's more fun. I get to hear your answer.
We've had a million conversations.
Many in this room have heard my answer.
I'll start. You add all the details I missed. But I mean, the major shift is that we started where our business was 100% trading fees.
And Bitcoin only.
Yeah, and Bitcoin only. And so, of course, it diversified on the number of assets, but it also has gotten to be about only 50% from trading fees. And the other half we call subscription and services, which is an amalgamation of all the non-trading fee revenue, which you think of as custody fees, right, that are more AUM-based, stable coins, staking, right? Things like Coinbase Card. And so what we've started to see is that the use cases outside of trading have really started to become a material part of our revenue. That does allow our revenue to be a bit more predictable than trading fees. That's important as a public company. It's also important for us just as a business in terms of how we do planning year to year. I can tell you Alicia and I have had many conversations where it was quite difficult to forecast some of these years where it's like, is this going to be another 600% year or negative 50%?
I take difficult to impossible usually in my conversations. My ability to predict volatility in crypto is like 0 for 1.
Yeah, so when we were purely a trading fee business, we had to sort of take inspiration from other companies that had gone through that. Like, talk to any other brokerage, right? Charles Schwab or E-Trade or something, and they can't, tell you what the S&P 500 is going to be next quarter. They'll tell you what the revenue is going to be. So it's basically unpredictable. Or maybe energy traders, or there's other industries that have had that. But it's been great that we've been able to diversify it, and it started to make our business a bit more predictable. But how do you think about it?
I agree. I think what's important is that we are trying to build a platform and that we're following our customers and we're adapting to the industry. One of the most exciting parts for me about being in crypto is you've seen new use cases emerge. We have a huge venture portfolio where we have insight into what's being developed. We can watch our customer behavior, and then we continue to build in the spirit of what our customers are engaging in. I want to go back to that about what have we got right, what have we got wrong, and because it's important in this early industry, we're not going to get it right all the time. I was in telecom and tech in like the late 90s, and a lot of those .coms failed. We're going to see a lot of failures in crypto in these early nascent days. But let's talk about how we've pivoted, because we've pivoted that revenue model, admit some big successes that we didn't think were going to be successes early on when we started, and some ones that we had to shut down early. We were too early in asset management. Now we're super excited to be in it again.
Yeah. I mean, we've generally taken this portfolio approach where we take 70% of our resources and we put it on what we call the core, which are our products that are already at scale. We have an internal metric around how big the revenue is, are they EBITDA positive, those kinds of things. And we make sure keep the main thing, right? 70% of resources there. 20% of resources we put on what we call adjacent bets, right? Which is things that are natural extensions of the core. Like an example would be we launched our international exchange that's doing derivatives. We're already dominant in spot. You can imagine derivatives, right? It's sort of a natural extension. But we also put 10% of resources on what we call our venture bets. And these are intended to be high risk, but if they work, they can be enormous. And it's okay if those have a higher rate of failure as long as they're small bets that are very deliberate about how we allocate our capital. And so an example of one of those that worked really well was USD Coin, right? We launched that a long time ago in partnership with Circle. Very small team worked on that. Frankly, I was even a little skeptical of it, to be honest with you. I think you were very positive on it.
I was the champion, yes.
Yeah, so this is actually a really good lesson I've learned is like, you don't want to have design by committee, right? Where it's like, well, everybody on the executive team has to be a yes to get it funded. It's like, well, by nature, the most disruptive ideas are contrarian, right? And so you actually want we have a product group structure now. Each of the product group leaders can have, if they want to champion it and put it in their budget, great. You only need to get one yes, right, from one leader. And so it's sort of like almost an internal version of venture capital, if you will. But anyway, some of these bets we made that were small, USD Coin turned out to be an enormous success. There were others that, you mentioned we tried actually asset management early on, and we were way too early, didn't work, we shut that down. We tried launching in Japan, that didn't work, we shut that down. There's been a handful of others that we tried that didn't work, and as long as they're reasonable small bets, I think that's good, and we need to make sure we don't let that deter us. We're going to keep trying more of them to look for the next big thing.
And that we're pivoting and adapting and growing with this industry alongside us.
Yeah.
Let's talk about institutional. We're in an institutional setting today. We have many of our customers and people focused on that area. Let's talk about how you've been surprised, because I think we've had a lot of conversations about that. I remember when I first started in 2018, I'm like, the institutions are coming. Don't worry, they're coming, they're coming. And crypto started off as a retail-led asset, retail-led engagement, but now we're really seeing a shift. What do you see as the institutional engagement with this asset class? What are you excited about in this space?
Yeah. Well, most of the capital in the world is tied up in institutions, right?
Yes.
I believe it's 90% plus.
Yes.
And so I think we realized at a certain point that although the early interest in crypto was retail, if we wanted there to be more and more fiat money in the world flowing into the crypto economy so that we could have this more fair, free, and global system, we needed to get institutions engaged. And they really had a different set of requirements around having a qualified custodian or meeting certain compliance standards around cybersecurity and audit. And so that definitely influenced our thinking about how we built out our product suites with Coinbase Prime, how we went and got certain compliance requirements completed or cybersecurity compliance requirements completed.
We built the DNA. We built institutional DNA deeply within the company.
Yeah. I mean, we opened a thriving office here in New York. We hired a lot of people from that world. And frankly, we became a public company. I think that we wanted to be able to be a peer to the Fortune 500 and let them know that we were meeting the highest standards available in terms of publicly audited financial statements, a Big Four accounting firm, and that's been enormously helpful for us. I believe at this point, we're the largest institutional company out there for crypto, and it's been really good to help get more and more into this space. And I think even in Q4, we talked about how even in the sort of the depths of this market, we were seeing an increase in institutions signing up. They weren't necessarily moving a lot of capital yet. I think people were kind of waiting on the sidelines, waiting to see.
Coiling spring.
Yeah, the coiled spring was Alicia's favorite word from the earnings call. But we were seeing people on board, go through that process to make sure that they were ready when they felt like the bottom was in and they wanted to allocate some percentage into this market.
Yep. All right, we're getting close to closing out, but I want to step back now and say, we've talked about how it's evolved. We've talked about the use cases. Where do you see us in 5 years, 7 years? When you think about the future of Coinbase, how do you paint the picture?
Yeah. Well, the vision we have for Coinbase's app is that it's going to be more and more like a super app. So, you can see this has been the case for some time in places like in Asia, where people have apps that they use digital money in all kinds of areas of their life, and they're doing messaging through there, they're doing commerce, they're doing sort of banking type services, they can get a loan, they can do payments, payroll, right? And even order food or pay their doctor or whatever. And so I think that in Coinbase's case, we want to be that super app, but it's all going to be based on these decentralized protocols, right? Not just for money and assets, but for decentralized social, decentralized versions of messaging, right? There's more and more merchants that are going to start accepting crypto. There's a whole system of NFTs out there that's happening. They want very simple interfaces to the DeFi protocols, maybe to get a loan or things like that. And it should work in a more global way, in the more global economy. Some of these users are going to access it from a totally self-custodial point of view, where they're actually storing their own crypto, and that allows us to cover more countries around the world. Others in more developed markets are going to do it in a way that's custodial, where Coinbase is really holding their assets for them. And so I think in that world, we can start to bring that vision of economic freedom, updating the financial system, and be the primary financial account for people who are accessing this world of Web3 and the decentralized crypto economy.
I'm going to leave you with that picture. Thank you so much, Brian.
Thanks, Alicia.
Thank you, audience.